We can no longer ignore that Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon. All it needs is a decision from their supreme leader. That is unacceptable, and this council must urge them to change course.
We have a very direct statement. Comes from Ambassador Dorothy Camille Shea, the interim U.S. rep to the UN. She said, quote, "We can no longer ignore that Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon."
Iran's leaders could have avoided this conflict had they agreed to a deal that would have prevented them from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. But they refused to do so, choosing instead to delay and deny. We can no longer ignore that Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon.
That's pretty stark language, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Stark is the right word. And what's really critical here is that phrase, all that it needs. That's not vague. It strongly implies they've probably crossed the breakout capability threshold.
Okay, so what does breakout actually mean in this context?
It means they likely have the technical knowledge, the skills, and enough fissile material, the stuff you need to make a nuclear weapon fairly quickly if they decide to. It's not about maybe someday, it's about they have the components ready to go.
Right, so it drastically shortens the timeline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The window for diplomacy or any kind of preventative action gets much, much smaller. It forces a real urgent rethink of non-proliferation strategies globally. We really can't ignore it, like she said.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit to something impacting tech and the economy. David Sachs, he's the White House AI and crypto czar, made a pretty interesting observation about crypto. He claimed that before President Trump's election, innovation in crypto was basically fleeing the U.S., said it was because, in his words, Biden had declared war on crypto. And then he contrasted that, adding that President Trump declared that he wanted to make the United States the crypto capital of the planet.
Before President Trump's election, all the innovation in the crypto community was moving offshore because Biden had declared war on crypto. President Trump declared that he wanted to make the United States the crypto capital of the planet.
Yeah, and that really throws into sharp relief how much government signals matter, right? Whether an industry feels there's a war being declared on it, or if it feels invited to be the capital.
So that perception directly drives where investment goes, where the innovators go.
Absolutely. It's called regulatory arbitrage.
Yeah.
Capital, talent, especially in new fields like crypto, blockchain, it flows to places perceived as more welcoming, or at least places with clearer rules.
Right. Predictability matters.
Huge deal. So one administration's stance pushes it away, another wants to pull it back in, make the U.S. the hub. It's basically a high-stakes competition for where this whole digital economy is going to be centered. Big implications for American leadership in tech.
Okay, let's move to something perhaps even closer to home for many listeners. Taxes. The president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce issued a pretty significant warning about the 2017 tax cuts, the Trump tax cuts. He stated, "If we do not extend the provisions of the 2017 Trump tax cuts, what we would see is somewhere between 60% and 65% of all the taxpayers in the U.S. will be facing substantially higher tax rates."
What we would see is somewhere between 60 and 65% of all the taxpayers in the United States will be facing substantially higher tax rates.
Wow. That's a huge number, 60 to 65%.
Yeah, the majority of taxpayers.
And we need to think about the ripple effects there. If those cuts expire, it's not just an abstract percentage point change on a form. We're talking about a potentially significant hit to the average American household's budget.
Less take-home pay, basically.
Less take-home pay, which means less spending power. That affects consumer demand, savings. It could even impact small businesses. Many are structured so their owners pay taxes at individual rates.
Well, it flows through the whole economy.
It really could. Less money circulating, potentially slower growth, less financial breathing room for families. It's a major economic consideration.
Definitely one to watch. Okay, our final point today touches on law enforcement, and it's quite troubling. This comes from the Department of Homeland Security. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin. She reported a 500% increase in assaults against our ICE enforcement operators.
They want their 15 minutes of fame. That's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing these ambitious Democrat politicians who want to get their 15 minutes of fame off of the backs of our ICE law enforcement officers. We, sadly, Maria, are seeing a 500% increase in assaults against our ICE enforcement operators.
500%.
That figure is it's staggering. A 500% increase in assaults against federal law enforcement officers.
Yeah. And she did connect to this, attributing it, saying, quote, "We sadly are seeing these ambitious Democrat politicians who want to get their 15 minutes of fame off of the backs of our ICE law enforcement."
Well, look, the Assistant Secretary clearly links it to political rhetoric, and that's her perspective from within DHS. But regardless of the why someone might point to, the core fact is that 500% increase.
Right, the number itself is the immediate concern.
It speaks volumes about the dangers these officers are facing on the ground. It highlights the real-world risks, the safety concerns. An escalation like that, it inevitably impacts morale, officer safety, how they can even do their jobs effectively while enforcing our laws at the border. It's a serious, serious trend.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit here. Iran's nuclear potential, crypto's future in the U.S., the looming tax changes, and the safety of ICE officers. What's the bottom line for you, for our listeners?
I think the bottom line is understanding that these aren't isolated issues. Global security affects domestic policy, economic decisions affect innovation, political rhetoric can have real-world consequences for people on the front lines. Our aim today was really just to equip you better, to help you see these connections and understand what's really at stake across these different critical areas.
Right, it's all interconnected. So for you, our listener, maybe something to think about is this. How do these different pieces of global threats, tech policy, your taxes, law enforcement challenges, how do they subtly weave together? What kind of complex web of challenges and maybe even opportunities does this create for America moving forward? What stands out most to you from all this?